All right, let's see what we have on the menu today with regard to individuals seeking out some mental health support. So, the reader or the writer shares, my boyfriend is depressed and he's constantly making me start regretting everything. I don't know how to fix this and I'm far too scared to ask for help. I've come here because there'd be more helpful members. It's far too worrying. Now, first, I want to preface before getting into this that I am only licensed in the state of Ohio and I have to be mindful of how I show up in these spaces. And so, being that I am not licensed across the state of Ohio, this is for educational purposes and not to supplement the therapy process. And so, something that that stuck out for me is that there's not a lot of context with this situation beyond the boyfriend being depressed. But something that stands out to me that the writer wrote is that he's constantly making me start regretting everything and sharing that I'm far too scared to ask for real help. And so for me, I'm like, who is the one that is seeking the therapy support? Who needs the help at this point in time? And so, what I would ask to this writer is, are they asking for help for themselves or for them? Because the story that I'm telling myself at this moment is that there is an underlying issue that's being navigated here. And I feel like safety is being flagged for me in this statement. And if that is the case to the reader, I would suggest for anyone who is navigating a situation of safety and risk of harm to self, whether it's intended or unintended. I think every major city has United Way, which is a great contact for resources for safety needs. Um, and also, too, just if it's one of those things rooted in the individual, the boyfriend who is depressed, based off of this kind of fear-based um, seeking, I'm wondering if the boyfriend's depression is manifesting as aggression, which is not uncommon, especially in a bipolar diagnosis. Um, and so I would tell the reader with the limited information is observing is there any self harm, indicators of harm to self or others. And if an individual is refusing to seek care and these things are happening, there's reduction in eating behaviors, they're not going to work, there's no medication being taken. They're engaging in behaviors that could ultimately end up in a hospitalization. Uh, most cities courts have what we call a mental health probate court, and anyone can call in and submit a case to the court for consideration to determine if what we call a civil warrant could be issued for the individual who may be refusing mental health support. And what a civil warrant does is that they identify what we call a CIT or a crisis intervention team police that are trained to navigate mental health support to go to the home. If the police show up, they can't bust down the doors like we see with a criminal warrant, but with a civil warrant, they have to open the door. Once the door is open or they see them out in a public space, they have to issue the warrant. And what that looks like is that the individual is escorted to the hospital, and or if they refuse because the police are mandated by the courts to issue the warrant. Unfortunately, this is kind of one of those things in mental health that we try not to do. A probate is that and it might be called something different in each city, but we try not to go this route because it can be triggering, can be jarring, especially if there's distrust, significant distrust with the police system. But they do escort to the hospital and do a transfer to the hospital staff who will then evaluate to see if there needs to be a 24, 72-hour hold and observation. Now, if going through the courts is not something you want to do, you can call non-emergency police and you can ask for a CIT trained police specifically. Don't just call and say I need police here because there's a mental health emergency. Ask for a trained CIT police, and they are trained to do what's called a pink slip. This might be something different language, but if they see that the individual is not able to manage themselves well, they can also issue a document that says, all right, this person is decompensated enough that we can transport them to the hospital. And so, me with this situation, there's kind of layers that are not addressed. I would support and encourage the individual to identify a counselor, because one thing about supporting individuals with chronic and medical and mental health concerns is that it does weigh down even the strongest of us. And so that's what I would recommend for this particular reader, if they needed a response. What would be your thoughts? If you were a clinician, how would you address this situation? There's not a lot of information, not a lot of context, but for me, what's screaming is that there's a safety need in the midst of this decompensating individual, and safety is always priority for both. And so that would be what I would recommend. If you've ever been in a situation like this where you're navigating someone who is depressed, and there's imposed regret, feelings of support, or whatever that dynamic looks like, how did you navigate it? What would you tell this writer with regard to that? Let me know in the comments. Let's see what else we have on our to-do for today. All right. All right, let's see what we have here. So the reader writes, I don't know how this worked, but I truly hope to find people with similar issues with the post. I've been facing a lot of issues with my body since the beginning of 2025. All of the issues are not physical per se, but more neurological. I got my first panic attack in January 2025, and I was so sure it was a heart attack because I had never experienced something so intense and so sudden before. Palpitations, dizziness, shortness of breath, stomach churning with each wave of adrenaline, whole body trembling. I never had a panic attack before that, therefore I never thought it could be that until I was rushed to the ER and none of the heart medicines were helpful. It went on for like 2 or 3 hours and I was not getting any relief from anything. I was so scared, and the doctors were more confused, almost thought I was overreacting. They checked my heart with ECG and confirmed it was fine. After a while, when I finally started to calm down, they told me it was a panic attack. But I was still unsure because I had so many complications after that attack, palpitations at random times, flinching at every sound, hot flashes or cold flashes, cold sweat, random ache in different places, especially the back and upper back. That sensitivity of my body started getting better after like a week or so, but I hated that feeling so much. I was extremely vulnerable and felt like crying all the time, especially because there was no explanation as to why it happened to me. I do have thyroid issues, and when my TSH levels were pretty high, it was around 17, and it is supposed to be around 4 if I'm not wrong. Doctor also gave me vitamin D supplements, increased my dosage for my thyroid from 25 to 35, then 50 milligrams. After that, I went through breakup, and after breakup, the panic attacks were so often it drained me completely. I was getting panic attacks like 3 to 5 times a week, and they last for hours and hours. The attack itself was scary enough, but aftershock leaves you so drained you can't function at all. I had to go to the hospital after every long attack to get drip because otherwise I would not be able to eat without puking. After 2 to 3 months, I started getting better as the grief of breakup started healing. Now I get panic attacks 2 to 3 times a month, and they last typically like an hour or less. I have not had the full-blown waves after waves panic attacks until very recently, and my nervous system is on the edge again. It is not as bad as at all as it was before, but it's still bad. When I'm in this state of mind, I can't help but think about my heart. If my heart is okay, I look for reassurance from anywhere I can find, despite knowing full well it was nothing to do with my heart. But when I'm going through attack, nothing makes sense. I get palpitations randomly and nausea, heat flashes, especially migraines. I know the triggers, which are spicy food, only sometimes in effect, caffeine, low blood sugar, any traumatic event, depression, grief, stress, anxiety, certain environments, etc. I've tried talking to my physician, but she asked me to consult with a psychiatrist, and if I tell her about the thyroid, she just increases the dosage. There's no proper talk. She does There is no proper talk. She does not listen, and I do not feel like I'm getting any answers. I want to be sure there's nothing with my body, if it is because of some deficiency or hormones or anything. I want to know the cause, and I want to understand my body better. For now, I just feel trapped and stuck in one place. I want to be able to live without walking on eggshells. So that was a lot that the reader had said, but gave a lot of context. And so the story that I'm telling myself with this situation, they said it was January 2025 that they began having these um, the initial panic attack. And what I'm thinking of is whether or not there was some challenges going on with the the writer's relationship that was jarring, that was leading to an impending breakup that triggered the panic attacks. One thing that we do as mental health providers is we always ask you, have you gone to the medical doctor to rule out that the reasons for your emotions or your physical responses is actually mental health symptoms? We want to rule it out. So I would tell this person, the fact that you went to the doctor and got a full workup, and the medications for the heart and things like that show that it is not related to anything biologically cardiac wise, which with panic attacks it does, people report that it feels like you're having a heart attack. That's a good thing to show like it's been ruled out. And so a lot of times when it comes to mental health, a lot of times we don't want to acknowledge that it is mental health because it's like, there's so much stigma around it. But what it sounds like is that this individual was having a very stressful event. And there's a book by Dr. Peter Levine called Healing Trauma, where it indicates that that trauma is the perception of stress. Because what's stressful for one person could be traumatic for another. And so, what I'm sensing and what I'm gathering is that this individual was going through a really difficult relationship challenge prior to this happening. Then the breakup kind of exacerbated it. But once she began exacerbating, meaning increased the frequency of it happening, and our amygdala, this little animalistic thing in our brain that's our fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, lets us know, like, hey, we're feeling unsafe. Even though there might not be physical unsafety, our bodies begin to put cues together to make us feel as though we are having those experiences. And it knows how to repeat it. It's behavior. And it's reminders. There's certain cues, the lighting, the smell, the scent, things that happen that are unconscious. So the difference between an anxiety attack and a panic attack, an anxiety attack is prefrontal. And so we begin to recognize that our thoughts can trigger an attack. Our anxiety thoughts can trigger an attack. A panic attack is biological, it's underneath. So our body's keeping the score. There is a book, you probably heard that before. Her body remembered something that happened during that time period where it was overwhelmed, and it was like, all right, we need to put some cues in place to protect us. And our bodies respond in this way. And so for me, she's done everything she could to rule out medical. And the doctor, I think, is accurate when it comes to, all right, now we need to talk with an actual medical prescriber, because if the physical health medication is not working, we need to talk about psychotropic medication. And yes, the brain is an organ, but our primary care physician can prescribe medication that is up to a certain level for managing, dopamine, serotonin, release and things of that nature. But you want somebody who's specialized in that, who can really hear your story, to be able to identify what medications would make the most sense. So I would have encouraged this individual to follow up with a psychiatrist, just to rule out and or rule in, meaning tell the story. Is it actually panic? Is this actually something that a low dose of medication will be able to manage? And then also too, let's process that breakup. It seems like that breakup was pretty tough. And if you've been in a relationship for a long time, it can be jarring to the best of us. And our bodies respond in ways that we're not expecting to. And it will continue until we begin to put the resources, the people, places, and the resources together to be able to manage well. And so there is grief, they're healing, but there is, in order to manage the actual biology behind the the panic attacks, or might need some anxiety medications to while processing the grief. And I wouldn't be surprised if they had begun to decrease in their panic symptoms. What are your thoughts? I'm great. I'm appreciative that this individual is assessing all of potential triggers. They said, I can't say if it's she, they, or him. They said that spicy food. So I'm wondering, like, our bodies, remember the little things of spicy food. Is that something that was a shared experience within the relationship that triggered it? The brain is an amazing thing. When I tell you, it is an amazing thing. Maybe they went to get coffee all the time with the caffeine, um, and things of that nature. Maybe they shared, they said a traumatic event. Maybe they were trauma bonded. I don't know. But needless to say, certain environments is definitely a trigger. So an avoidance of environments, which is a trauma response. So I would definitely share that this is, and the walking on eggshells is that fear of having, it was a stress. The panic already is stressful, and then to add on the physical response of that can be definitely triggering for the best of us. So let me know what your thoughts are with this particular story. What would you share? How have you handled panic attacks in the past? And we'll come again another day for another mental health support to see who is out there that needs some guidance. Again, um, this is not to supplement mental health therapy. It's just kind of evaluating and assessing and providing psychoeducation around symptoms and making an informed decision. But definitely all things therapist. Have a good day, and until the next time.